She had everything the world told her she should want. The penthouse on the 42nd floor. The company worth $300 million. The dress that cost more than most people earned in a month. And yet, on the night that everything began to change, Vanessa Cole sat in the center of a glittering ballroom with 300 people watching her, and the only thing she could feel was the weight of her own silence pressing down against her chest, like something she had swallowed and never learned to release. The chandeliers overhead cast warm gold light across the crowd. Glasses clinked. A string quartet played something elegant and forgettable in the far corner. The annual gala for the Meridian Children's Foundation was, by every visible measure, a flawless success, and Vanessa had designed it that way because flawless success was the only language she still trusted. She was 34 years old, and the city knew her face the way it knew its own skyline. The tabloids had given her many names over the years. Most recently, a gossip columnist had coined the phrase that stuck hardest: Ice Queen Billionaire. She had read it once, put her phone face down on her desk, and never mentioned it again. But the name lived in rooms she entered before she arrived, settling into conversations like frost on glass. Men came for her the way they always had in waves, persistent and predictable. That evening alone, 3 had already approached her with the particular brand of rehearsed charm she recognized on sight. The first was a tech entrepreneur who wore his watch like punctuation and talked about synergy and legacy and alignment, until her eyes went still and flat, and he drifted away toward the bar. The second was a city councilman with silver hair, who let his hand rest a half-second too long on the arm of her wheelchair. She looked at his hand. He removed it. He did not come back. The third was the worst kind, a man whose pity wore the costume of admiration, who said things like "You're so inspiring," and looked at her legs with a softness that made her feel like an exhibit. She dismissed him with 4 words and did not watch him leave. This was the architecture of her evenings. This was the architecture of the last 10 years. When the last of the presentations concluded, and the crowd shifted toward the auction tables, Vanessa permitted herself a single moment alone near the tall windows that looked out over the city. The rain had started somewhere during the speeches, a proper autumn storm, the kind that turned the streets into mirrors and made the city look like it existed in 2 dimensions at once. She watched a cab inch through the intersection 30 floors below and felt, as she often did in moments of stillness, the hollow pull of something she had no clean name for. Not loneliness, exactly. She was too practiced at solitude to call it loneliness. Something older than that, something she had learned to insulate herself from with the same precision she applied to quarterly earnings and asset management. She turned from the window. Across the room, the foundation's coordinator was waving her toward the next event. Vanessa straightened her posture, smoothed the expression from her face, and wheeled forward into the light. On the table beside the entrance to the auction floor, a silver-framed photograph sat face down. It had been face down all evening. She did not turn it over. She had not turned it over in 6 years. Ethan Brooks had not planned on being there. That was perhaps the most important thing about him, that almost nothing significant in his life had ever been planned. And somehow he had remained, despite everything, a man who still believed in good things. He was 38 years old, and he worked with his hands for a living, and his truck had 200,000 miles on it, and on most mornings his alarm went off at 5:15, and he made breakfast for his daughter before the rest of the neighborhood was awake. He was not the kind of man who attended charity galas. He owned one blazer, which he had purchased 3 years ago for his company's holiday party. And it still fit, more or less, if he did not raise his arms above his shoulders. His daughter Lily was 8 years old and had her mother's eyes and her own entirely original stubbornness, which Ethan considered the best quality she possessed. She had a small defect in the wall of her heart, a condition the cardiologist described as manageable for now, with a corrective procedure likely needed within the next 2 or 3 years. The cost of that procedure sat at the back of Ethan's mind, the way a stone sits at the bottom of a clear stream, always visible, always there, exerting its quiet pressure. He worked HVAC repair during the day and picked up odd jobs on evenings and weekends. He did not complain about this. Complaining had always struck him as a poor use of the energy required to keep going. Lily had seen a piece about the Meridian Foundation on the news 3 weeks earlier. The segment had shown a little girl in a wheelchair receiving a custom-designed chair donated by the foundation, a chair painted with butterflies, because the girl had asked for butterflies. Lily had watched this with her full and considerable attention, and then she had looked at Ethan and said, simply, "I want to meet the lady who does that." The lady, it turned out, was Vanessa Cole. Ethan had looked up the foundation, found that their annual gala included a small public auction open to general ticket holders, and bought 2 tickets for $35 each, which was not nothing, but which he decided was the right thing to spend $35 on. He parked 3 blocks away because the garage fees were alarming. And he and Lily walked through the rain, sharing a single umbrella, which meant that one side of Ethan's blazer was damp by the time they reached the entrance. He told Lily this was a good sign because it meant they were the kind of people who didn't worry about blazers. She seemed to accept this. Inside, Lily immediately became the smallest person in any direction. And she gripped his hand and looked at everything with wide, evaluating eyes. She was not easily impressed. She was 8 and had opinions. But the ballroom made her go quiet in a way that meant she was filing information. They were making their way toward the auction tables. Lily half a step ahead of him the way she always was when it happened. A server moved too quickly around a corner. Lily sidestepped. Her elbow caught the edge of a tray someone was carrying, a glass of sparkling water. The tall, narrow kind, almost full, made a brief arc and landed directly across the lap of a woman in a sleek black wheelchair who had been positioned near the end of the table, looking at the auction items. The ballroom did not go silent, but the people immediately around them did. A small radius of frozen, horrified attention formed in the space of 2 seconds. The woman looked down at her dress. The water spread dark across the ivory fabric. Someone nearby made the sharp intake of breath that precedes a disaster being assessed. Lily went very still beside Ethan and looked up at him with an expression that said she understood, precisely, what had happened and how serious it was. Ethan looked at the woman. She was already looking at him, not at the dress, not at Lily, but at him with the kind of eyes that had spent years deciding things quickly and defending the decision. He could feel the temperature in the small radius drop another degree. He crouched down to Lily's level first, because that was always the right first move, and he said quietly, "Tell the lady you're sorry." Lily turned